Welcome to New West Press Audio, the official podcast of New West Press. I'm General Manager Matt Bowes, and with me today is J.T. Siemens, author of To Those Who Killed Me, the first book in our spring 2022 season. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Matt. How about yourself?
No, good. Do you want to go by JT, or should we blow your cover and go say your actual name? Is this a trade secret or
It's
something?
not. It's not a trade secret. Yeah, we can go with Jeremy for today.
Okay,
Let's mix it
do
up.
Jeremy.
Yeah, yeah.
You heard it here, folks. First, folks. Jay is actually Jeremy. So there's that. So you have got your debut crime novel, To Those Who Killed Me, which is coming out this spring in April. Do you want to let our listeners know what it's about?
Yeah. So it's I'll give a little bit of a backstory first of all, how the idea for the novel came to be, and it had to do with a murder that occurred at my workplace. I worked as a personal trainer for quite a few years, and there was a rather gory murder that took place. I didn't witness it. I saw some of the aftermath, but I know somebody who did witness it. One of my colleagues, and no, she witnessed. Sorry, she came upon the body. She didn't witness the actual murder, but I was able to see how unhinged she became through that. It's otherwise very strong, very athletic, very tough woman. It really took a toll on her, and that kind of fascinated me to see somebody sort of be so affected. It's not a big surprise that it would be, but I got to witness that, and I decided to write a short story from a female perspective, kind of as a gamble, and it was well received. And I thought there's a lot more here, and the character of Sloan Donovan came ready-made to me, and so I took that as impetus to as a starting off point for the novel, about a woman who finds she's an ex-cop. She struggles with mental health issues, most notably bipolar disorder, and has an on-again, off-again relationship with her meds. And she stumbles across the body of her friend when she's coming back from a run at her workplace, and how she becomes very, very unhinged by that. And it looks like a suicide, but she's thinking that it's much, much more than that. And nobody believes her at first. And she decides to launch her own investigation into what really happened.
I think everyone's first encounter with real death in real life does kind of unhinge them. I remember I was driving to a birthday party when I was like 10 or something, and my mom had to go help a guy who had a heart attack at the side of the road. And yeah, he died right there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I think about it fairly regularly. Like it's obviously not like a brutal murder or anything, but like the first inkling of your mortality, I think it does kind of mess with you.
Yeah, I think it does take a toll, and it's something that in in a lot of crime fiction, I actually, you don't see the main characters or the protagonists being so deeply affected by the crimes that they witness or the violence that they're subjected to. And I kind of wanted to tap into that a little bit deeper in this novel in a more realistic way.
Yeah, usually they've got kind of a suit of armor built up around them, or they're just super callous people, depending on what flavor of hardboiled you're reading, I guess.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about this is where you're working and what the main character's job is, because she's involved in the fitness industry. And I don't know if I could think of another mystery series where the main character is specifically like a fitness instructor. You've got kind of sports people like AJ Devlin's books with Hammerhead Jed, former pro wrestler, or pro boxer is a big one,
Yeah.
or like surfer, I guess.
Yeah.
But what was it about kind of your work and the intersection there that made sense to write about?
Well, I think, the easy answer is to say that I was so immersed in that world, and I still am to a slightly lesser degree now. And so I was in contact with a lot of people, men and women specifically, who were physically and athletically able enough to pull off something like this, to hold their own against in a hairy situation. And I met people who came from backgrounds in law enforcement or the military, and who ended up as maybe they couldn't sustain that anymore, so they ended up working part-time as personal trainers, or personal trainers who use that as a jumping off point to go into law enforcement.
Hmm.
So I think there was I saw firsthand some of that, and it seemed like a natural place for someone to be. A lot of cops or ex-cops that I've known are also heavily into fitness or mixed martial arts or boxing or some other form of athletics.
Hmm.
At least where I live, it's that stereotype of the donut eating cop is kind of it's an old tired stereotype that doesn't seem to exist, at least in Vancouver anymore.
I've met a few in Edmonton, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think Vancouver is maybe a bit more image conscious with
yeah.
its
I think
police
so. Yeah,
force.
yeah.
Uh, but something I thought of, like, I guess I'll tell the listeners, I actually edited this book, so I worked with you pretty closely on it. But the fitness world also allows your main character to get in close with rich people who would, I'm assuming, is probably most of the people who go to kind of like a swanky fitness place.
Yeah.
And, going back to that hard boiled tradition, these crimes usually end up on the street. People, their dead bodies are on the street, crimes are located there, but your Marlows, your Spades, they usually find themselves working their way up to a rich guy or
Right.
someone where the elite class is doing crimes just like the lower classes. Do you want to talk about that intersection there? Because it's definitely in this book. And I mean, I've never lived in Vancouver, but I feel like wealth disparity in Vancouver is probably a very important topic.
Yeah, hugely. I'm very interested in that sort of juxtaposition of the extremes. I remember West Vancouver, where I worked at the time, and where a lot of the story is set. It's set up on the country club is actually set up on the hills, and you can look down over the city. This is where
There's
I
a
live.
metaphor right there, right?
Exactly. And so there's some mornings I'd be looking out. It's a beautiful, beautiful view. The whole lower mainland stretched out in front of me. But I'd also, go right over there is the downtown east side, right over past those cranes and the waterfront, where it's Canada's poorest postal code, and full of despair and addiction, extreme poverty, and so on. And I was, it's just a quick drive over the bridge, hang a left, go through Gastown, and you're there. And even that strip along Hastings Street, Hastings Street is this long thoroughfare that you can take from the more suburbs in North Burnaby, cross over the Trans-Canada Highway, then you're in East Vancouver and sort of a working class area, and all of a sudden you're driving through Skid Row, and a few
Hmm.
minutes later you're in the business district. And so it's fascinating. And I'm a walker too, so I spend a lot of time walking around various parts and exploring a little bit more in detail some of those areas. When I started dealing with some of the crimes, or delving into some of the crimes that occurred in this novel, and then start to do the math on some of the profits that can be had, you see very quickly how people can be exploited in those areas with regards to addiction, prostitution, and somebody's making a lot of money.
Hmm.
And I remember reading this story. This also ties into the novel. It was years ago. It was a newspaper clipping, and I think it happened in Toronto, where young girls were being recruited from a homeless shelter and being poached. And the person behind it all was in fact was a woman.
Hmm.
And that kind of fascinated me. And I clipped that up probably a good 12 years ago. And I thought there was an idea there for a story. So that's tied into it as well.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tangent, but there's a sort of alternative histories book I really like called Anno Dracula by Kim Newman. Have you ever heard of this?
I don't think so. No.
So it basically takes place, it's like the plot of Dracula, but mixed in with a lot of other Victorian goings on and kind of characters from other books, sort of like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, if you remember that.
Right.
But one thing that I really liked in that book is that vampirism, which so Dracula ends up marrying Queen Elizabeth, so he becomes basically the King of England. and vampirism becomes a mark among the upper classes of being close to nobility, to the royalty, but it also starts to crop up in the lower classes, prostitutes and you know gophers and people working for rich people, and it's like a deliberate, like actual blood-based tie between poor people and rich people, and sort
Right.
of the middle class doesn't really get involved so much, but there is a sort of synchronicity between poor and rich. So I really like that, and I think you can kind of see that in the developing Vancouver Noir scene too,
Yeah.
because I haven't read a Vancouver Noir book. Your Sam Weebs, your JT Siemenses, your AJ Devlins, lots of oh, DB Carews, lots
Yeah.
of letter-based names, but
Right.
there's usually a link between the two things that those of us outside Vancouver know about it, is that A, there's a lot of rich people buying properties, and B, there's a lot of poor people getting shepherded into what is like quite a small piece of real estate. Like
Yeah.
I've walked through there, and it's not big. It's like maybe 5 or 6 blocks long, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the land. The land is kind of the most important part of the story. It's like with Lex Luthor in the first Superman movie. Like, why do you got to invest in land? Because they're not making any more of it.
Right. Right.
And in a place like Vancouver, you know, the gentrification is going to be an issue there. And I think all of you are tapping into that with your books.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just interesting to see those two sort of anxieties linked together, like vampire blood.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I noticed, yes, ever since the Olympics, that area used to be much more spread out, and
Mm-hmm,
now it's really kept contained. Gastown used to be a pretty rough place,
mm-hmm,
almost as bad as the downtown east side. It was kind of the border was not very distinct, and now it is. Now
mm-hmm,
Gastown's it's polished. I mean, you could almost. I mean, they've got little trendy restaurants and boutiques opening up in some of the alleys where normally it was all
mm-hmm.
graffiti and needles and things like that. Now it's more apparent. It's more exposed because there are so many people right on that congested on that 5 block area. If you go a few blocks further toward the water, though, it kind of continues on. There's a lot of vice going on down there, and
So it's being squeezed out.
yeah, it's kind of pushed out of sight into there's an area where there's these sort of abandoned warehouse district, not so much abandoned anymore. But there's still there's a lot of stuff going on. That's a little bit off the main artery that is Hastings Street. But that's a lot of things have changed. And with regards to the whole prostitution angle, which factors heavily into the story, a lot of that's gone online in recent years. So there's
Yeah.
a little bit less street activity. But I will say also that in doing my research, I did probably more research than was ever necessary for this novel. But I spent a fair bit of time going in and out of some of the bars and some of the businesses on that strip as well. So I delved a little bit deeper. I went through what I call a Bukowski phase, which was a little bit like life imitating art for a while, but it allowed me to see a little bit deeper into and actually talk to people and get to know some of the people. And they didn't trust me at first, but as I hung around a little bit more, they did. It opened up to me, and they got some very amazing anecdotes from some of the local denizens there. And I also got gave me a real opportunity to see firsthand, especially late at night, some of the predatorial activity that was going on. That was kind of when all the badass pimps came out, stuff like that. It's a different animal, I would say, after 11 o'clock at night, especially into the wee hours. It's an area that never really sleeps. So it's going strong. It's like an open air drug market, and it's going strong 24/7. But I would say it gets decidedly a little bit rougher, or a lot rougher in the wee hours. Yeah.
Yeah, the only time I've been there, I was actually going from Gastown to I think it's the Sun Yat-sen Garden in
Yeah.
Chinatown.
Yeah.
And I wasn't actually aware that I was walking through East Hastings. So like that was a pretty quick step walk once I realized what was happening. But
Yeah.
it is quite the difference there. And I guess my other point of reference for it is Norm Boucher's book, Horseplay,
Yeah,
which
fantastic book. Yeah,
yeah, that was in
yeah,
'83. I think he does
yeah,
that. And what I found really interesting about that one is you can be a Bukowski. He was an undercover cop, so he was
yeah,
there
yeah,
trying to do drug deals.
yeah,
But like you could be a Bukowski who commutes because he didn't live there.
yeah,
He
yeah.
would just
That's
drive
right,
in and then do his job and then drive out.
right,
And his cover that was that he was working on a pipeline, I think, in Prince Rupert, possibly somewhere up there. Like that was
right,
his cover.
right. Yeah,
But like it's something you can actually dip into, which is very strange to me. But yeah, it is kind of the epicenter of Vancouver Noir. Everything seems to come from that, as
yeah.
well as
Yeah.
Cole Harbor, right? Like you got your low life and your high life.
That's right. That's right. You know, and I moved to Vancouver in the mid '90s, and at that time it was a different city, and I came from a small town in the Okanagan, Vernon, and a very quiet place. And I was really I saw Hastings Street for the first time, and the Granville Strip was a lot rougher back then too.
Hmm.
In the '90s, there was a
Yeah,
lot of
that's where
action
Norm
there.
was mostly going. That
Yeah,
his
yeah,
book
and
is My
I was.
Adventures on the Granville Strip, I
That's
think.
right. And at that
Yeah.
time, I was just starting to write screenplays, but I was really drawn toward. It was just constant action all the time.
Hmm.
Every other area of the city seemed very sterile
Hmm.
comparatively, and so I've always kind of been drawn to. It's a phenomenal place to experience. At least I think so. And there's just continuous movement, activity, and chaos, and there's a part of me that really appeals to.
So going back to the fitness aspect of the book, do you have any tips for authors on how to stay fit? Because I feel like they're kind of at odds sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to sit down to write your book, or maybe stand up or be on a treadmill or something. But how do you work through the mindset of, I have to get my pages done versus I have to get my exercises done? Because you're a pretty fit guy, and
Yeah.
it seems like writing a book didn't stop you. So what can you tell the rest of us?
Well, I've gotten really good at maximizing my time with fitness. I actually when I do hit the gym, I really enjoy my work. It helps to enjoy it,
Hmm.
to get to a point where it's not painful anymore. A lot of people approach fitness in a series of starts and stops, so they never really get to that point, and they're sore, and it feels like a negative experience. So you can
Hmm.
get past that. It's kind of like when you get writing for a while and you build momentum, and it starts to flow, and everything starts to fall into place. It's kind of like that. So a lot of times people they think workouts have to be these long, arduous things, and really it just has to be kind of a focused, mindful attack that can be done in 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And I found also that there's a strong link for me between creativity and fitness too. Like if let's say I'm writing in the morning, it's going great, and I hit a bit of a wall. I get some fitness and go for a walk or a bike ride. Something about that oxygenation of the brain, it can unlock something, and ideas will come, or I'll unstuck, and I'll even make a little note. I'll dictate into my phone or whatever, and
Hmm.
it seems to really enhance just getting the blood flowing. I think too, especially during the pandemic, I think it's so important for people to keep their immune system strong,
Hmm.
and activity is a really great way to do it. A lot of writers are well, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the authors that I really follow, they're avid walkers. Walking usually factors in,
Yeah.
and I'm you kind of kill two birds with one stone. I'll walk these distances, and I'm not so much of a runner anymore. Running doesn't do it for me, but it allows me to observe the world I'm in too.
Hmm.
So like the information, or cycling's another one. Like it's amazing what you can take in, and then get some fresh air and exercise at the same time. So
Yeah, and you get some good graffiti photos on your Instagram too. So
yeah,
that's worth
yeah,
checking
and
out.
it helps that I'm not I'm not afraid to go into alleys and places like that. I've been in some interesting places for sure.
So you went into writing this book, I'm assuming, because it's set up this way with a series in mind. You
Yeah,
could conceivably read this as one, but you want to have more come out.
yeah.
So what did you do in order to give this thing legs? Like, how do you design characters to make them come up later on? There's actually a couple that I hope come up in later books because I found them very funny, but
Yeah.
their stories are basically done. So how do you like kind of how do you rejuvenate it? What's your strategy towards having like a universe going?
Well, let's start with the character of Sloan Donovan. I think, it wasn't until I actually finished the first draft of the initial novel. It was back then it had a different title. I realized that this character, she's just on the verge of becoming a PI. So, and she's at that age, and she's keen and she's hungry, and she's sort of a natural at it. That her story is just beginning, although she's certainly taken her licks in this novel. And kind of I gave her a good partner. My characters are kind of composites of different people I've known, and people I find entertaining and witty, and things like that. And once I can sort of tap into a character's voice, like Wayne, for instance, he's a very fun character, right? As a sidekick, he's kind of a throwback to a bygone era, a little bit of a Neanderthal at times. And then, well, I do quite extensive character sketches. That's part of the planning process. I wrote the initial draft of To Those Who Killed Me without an outline, without sketches, and it was some parts. The beginning, middle, and end are kind of the same, but there was a lot of subplots that drifted away, went nowhere, and there was a lot of loose ends that didn't really get tied up. So I attended a master's crime writing class taught by Bill Deverell, and he read the opening chapters, and he goes, you got something here, but when you're trying to describe the overall flow of it, there's some weaknesses, and I think you should go back, do a novel, do an outline, and essentially start over. And I really did not want to do that. The whole outlining did not sound very appealing, but I did it. I went back to square one. I mean, the story was there, some of the characters were there, and I just broke it down into its individual scenes. So the outline made about 30 pages. I still do that now with my other books too. And then character sketches of all the major characters. So I know everything about their backstory, their physicality, education level, likes and dislikes and picadillos. And so they become very, very real in my mind. And even the so-called villains, I still want to flesh them out. I never want a character to be, sort of single dimensional. It's much more interesting when they've got a cool or interesting backstory or a reason for doing what they're doing that exists outside of just being a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yeah, and the comedic characters like Wayne and especially Dogger, there's an art to making them sort of unlikable but also likable.
Yeah.
Like by the end, Dogger is a terrible person, but I did sort of like him, and I would like him to come up later again, just because I think he's funny, and seeing his downfall is very enjoyable.
Yeah.
So designing someone who you don't like, that obviously takes some talent, but it's probably easier than making someone we're supposed to like, right? Like you can point to being lecherous or being a gambler or something. Like these are sort of traits that we're trained not to like. But how do you make empathy happen? That's got to be a bit more difficult.
Yes, you have to give a guy like Dogger. He better be charming if he's going to be spouting off all that kind of stuff and doing what he does. Especially, and I mean it's set in 2019, but not that far off from today. He wouldn't get away with a lot of that stuff in a workplace. So he had to be charming, the kind of guy you love to hate, I guess. I've known guys like that, or at least in part, some real sort of dogs they were fun and entertaining guys to hang out with for a little bit, at least from the guy's perspective, maybe not so much from a female perspective, but it wasn't a stretch. And as a trainer for many years, also, people really they really open up, and you hear some outrageous things. Some of the stuff that comes out of people's mouths. I mean, it's just crazy. So yeah, he was another one of those characters that I had fun writing. I actually had to edit him down a fair bit, tone down his misogyny and stuff like that. Otherwise, he'd be absolutely despicable.
He's got to kind of walk a line where you don't like him, but also you got to be going like, let's see what he does next. He's an asshole, but he's entertaining, and it's always satisfying to see someone like kind of get got afterwards. So
Exactly. Yeah.
you have to kind of build them up to knock them down.
Yeah.
So you have got a sample from the book to run by our listeners. Do you want to set that up, or
For sure.
I think it's probably pretty easy.
It is pretty easy. It's literally page one. It's chapter one. This like I said, it's been refined many times over the years, but essentially it's the same scene. Sloane's coming back from a run. She's to her workplace in the hills of West Vancouver, and she discovers some woman in her car. And I'll start
Great.
right now. Chapter one, Thursday, October 10th, 2019. The brunette in the silver Audi convertible was dead. Even from 30 feet away, I knew from the stillness and the angle of her slumped head down and to the right. I had seen that angle before. As I approached the rear of the vehicle, blood slammed through my neck and temples, my body still buzzing with endorphins from my 12-mile run up and down the hills of West Vancouver. As I came closer, I saw the small woven dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror. My throat made a strangled sound as I stopped breathing. It was my friend Jerry's car, and she was in the driver's seat. Jerry, oh my God. I sprinted to the convertible, shouting her name as I reached in and shook her shoulders. Her head lolled further down, and her skin was pale where normally it was olive. I pushed my fingers through her thick hair to check for a pulse that wasn't there. Bringing my face near hers, I couldn't feel any breath, though the smell of wine was strong. An open swell bottle sat in the center console. The car's digital clock read 4:24 p.m. An unsealed white envelope and an iPhone sat on her lap. On the floor mat of the passenger side was an open bottle of prescription pills, some of which had spilled out. Zolpidem, sleeping pills. I pulled out my phone and called 911. My name is Sloane Donovan. I found a woman in her car who seems to have OD'd on sleeping pills. No vitals. Hillside Country Club, 930 Cross Creek Road, West Vancouver, end of the South Service Road. Yanking open the driver's door, I got my hands under her armpits and dragged her onto the road. Her phone clattered onto the gravel nearby. As I knelt to begin CPR, everything around me constricted, swirled, and blurred. The trees, the car, my friend on the road. A second later, reality came roaring back. Impossible. I'd spoken to her only a few days earlier. This was wrong, a waking nightmare, a sick joke. Interlacing my fingers together, I pumped her sternum. After 30 compressions, I tilted her head back, pinched her nose, lowered my lips to hers, and gave 2 breaths. Following 3 more cycles of CPR, I thought I saw her facial muscles twitch. Another cycle. One of her brown eyes was partially open. 5 cycles. No response. Another cycle. Nothing. In the polished chrome rim of the rear wheel, I caught a distorted reflection of myself. Eyes wild, red ponytail bobbing up and down. In the branches of a hemlock above, a crow mocked me and flew off. Give up, it seemed to say. No. A drop of sweat from my face splashed onto Jerry's blue lips, rolled down her cheek before getting lost in the twisted gully of her ear. After countless rounds of CPR, I got dizzy and had to stop and breathe and shake out my hands. Only then did I take in the tight red and black silk cocktail dress she wore, its pattern like angry Japanese characters. Her fingernails were painted the same red as her dress. Her wedding ring was off. So was one of her black leather pumps, probably still in the car. 20 feet in front of us sat a rusty blue shipping container. Beside it were several stacks of old tires and a pile of discarded lumber. Country club junkyard. I continued CPR. Blink. My sister, Stephanie, her nails bit into the quick. Blink. Little Charlie, blonde hair neatly parted, purple Barney dinosaur beside him. Blink. Blue-faced baby Emma snuggled into Steph's cold bosom. Blink. Steph's head cocked down at that same final angle Jerry's had just been. The phone buzzed on the gravel nearby. As I pumped her chest, I glanced over. The display read, payphone, 604-615-6761. From habit, I quickly recited the number under my breath before going back to mouth, running the digits through my head a few times so they stuck. Sirens howled beyond the trees. I saw the envelope a few feet away. The sirens grew louder. I remembered finding Steph's note on the bedside table and reading the words that would haunt me forever. I'd made the mistake of showing the note to my mother, thinking she needed to know. She didn't. I grabbed the envelope and shoved it into the waistband of my tights, pulling my shirt over it just before a fire engine crested the rise. The truck rumbled to a halt 20 feet away. 4 firefighters jumped out. A burly middle-aged man and a younger guy carrying EMT kits rushed to Jerry's body as I moved back. They checked her vitals. How long ago did you find her? The young guy asked. 5 minutes. She was unresponsive to CPR. He knelt down and started CPR again while the older firefighter prepped the defibrillator. A third came in with a syringe of Narcan, inserted the end into Jerry's right nostril and pressed the plunger. I've seen OD victims go from dead and blue to babbling and animated only seconds after being dosed with Narcan. Jerry didn't even twitch. The fourth firefighter looked inside the car and took notes. A police cruiser pulled up nearly at the same time as the ambulance. Two paramedics, a male and female, hustled over bearing a stretcher and cardiac support pump. Suddenly, the area was abuzz with professionals trying against hope to raise the dead. The female medic radioed ahead to the ER dock. The two cops got out and stood in the periphery. The driver was a new guy in his early 20s with newbie eyes. His partner was a shaven head bodybuilder Persian, maybe mid-30s. He squinted in an assessment of the scene, Jerry's body, me, his watch. Constable Gorbani, his nameplate read. The newbie's name was Hershaw. This how you found her? Gorbani said. She was in the driver's seat, I said, my voice cracking. Her name is Jerry Hart. She's my friend. Hershaw jotted my name and the details of what I saw when I arrived on the scene. Gorbani took photos. As he leaned into the car, he sniffed the open swell bottle and raised his thick brows. Someone called her from a payphone a few minutes before you arrived, I said. Gorbani straightened and studied me. So? Something's not right about this. I spoke to Jerry just a few days ago and she seemed normal. I remember your picture in the paper, he said. You used to be a cop. Hershaw cocked an eyebrow. A couple of firefighters glanced over. That's right, I said. Gorbani's eyes narrowed as he nodded again, accessing my file in the database somewhere in his stubbly head. I looked over at Jerry being worked on by the EMTs. With forced calm, I asked for his card. We've got your information, he said. We'll contact you if we need more. All the same, I said. Gorbani gave me a hard stare as he unsnapped a pocket on his utility belt right behind his Glock. He handed me the card. Constable Cyrus Gorbani. An olive green Lincoln Navigator crunched up to the left of the cruiser and a man got out. Of course, it had to be big, bad, bald Steve Bolger. I'd have recognized his basketball-sized head a mile off. The coroner had been around forever and we had worked downtown at the same time. He had voiced strong public disapproval regarding my termination. During his 30-plus years on the job, he'd also voiced strong private disapproval of women on the force. I had nothing to say to him, so I turned and started up the hill. Donovan, Bolger called out. You called this in? I turned back and looked at him, still walking backwards. Even from 20 feet away, Bolger had the kind of face that made me want to lance him like a bowl of oil. Yeah, I said. He offered a crooked smirk and raised his eyebrow. I turned again and climbed the steep curving drive past the groundkeeper sheds. Two crows bickered atop a light post. The post was 20 feet high and perched 3/4 of the way up was a security camera. I looked at the camera, then down the hill to where the coroner and the two cops stood watching me. Murmurs floated up the hill, and I assumed that Bolger was filling them in on my less than graceful exit from law enforcement. Bolger pulled on latex gloves and caught up to Jerry's body just before she was lifted into the ambulance. He checked her vitals along with the time, then narrated into his smartphone. The doors slammed shut, followed by 3 perfect sounds of seconds of silence. Then came faint thocks and grunts, club members commencing a late afternoon tennis match, oblivious that just down the hill, one of their own had died amid the junk that no one wanted to see.
Whew. Well, there you go. Not looking too happy right off the hop.
Yeah.
So this book was just reviewed by Publishers Weekly, who said this gritty crime tale, which snakes through Vancouver's squalid back streets, plunges the fearless, at times reckless heroine into a surfeit of horrific encounters with addicts and abusers, rapists and killers. This isn't for the faint-hearted, and I would happen to agree, but I also think it's really good. So thanks for coming on today, and hopefully this goes well for us.
Thanks, Matt. That's excellent.
Yeah. So this is Matt Bose signing off for New West Press Audio.